Folks, my new graphic novel, Unwanted, A Tall Tale of the Old West and New Wave, is out for pre-order now. I've been working on this for 25 years. It's a dark comedy with a shiny exterior. Please check it out at unwantedbook.com. Good afternoon, Michael Malice here. Let that be your welcome for the next hour. You guys are in for a lot of fun. We are talking to one of my absolute favorite people, especially among conservatives, to talk to Buck Sexton, co-host of Clay and Buck. You've seen him everywhere there is in right of center circles. Buck, you have a new book called Manufacturing Delusion. What is the subtitle?
How the left uses brainwashing, indoctrination, and propaganda against you.
See, we're going to have a fun discussion because I think I disagree a little bit with the premise, but I would love to hear more about the framing.
I mean, look, the basic idea here is like how it's like, what is it that makes people so crazy? Like, how is it that we had a mass hysteria during COVID where 90% of doctors and scientists and they were all so obviously wrong and they were so full of shit and the whole thing was absurd. Like, what happened here? And okay, that's not really just limited to that. That was just kind of the broad spectrum view of it. Like, what is another instance of this, or where else? And I would argue in smaller moments in time or smaller movements, but whether it's BLM or like climate change catastrophism, the transgender stuff, I have a whole bunch of things. There are just delusions that people become very set on. And there's a lot of this, but I mean, you could come up with a very, very long list. I just focus on some of them. I said, well, where is it that we have seen historically the idea that you can force people into delusions? Now, whether it's truly just through force or it's they just, decide that they're actually going to say what you want them to say without believing it. I mean, that's always a tough thing to parse. But no, I went back and I looked at the earliest, if you will, mind control experiments in a sense, not really mind control, but the origins of behavioral conditioning and Pavlov, and then look at, and there's like this famous story with Pavlov, doesn't really involve him, it involves some of his subjects, the dogs. And if you're a dog lover, you don't really want to know very much about what Pavlov really did to the dogs. Unfortunately, it's bad. It's bad. Yeah.
I am a dog lover.
There was no ASPCA back then in the Russia/early Soviet Union. But there were all these dogs that were kept in this lab and there was a flood. This was when it was, I guess, Leningrad, St. Petersburg. It changed the name a few times. And the dogs were traumatized by this, so much so that their conditioning was wiped away and that they had major changes in behavior from the trauma of slowly but surely, as the water is rising, the lab thinking that they're all going to drown in these cages. And that sparked a whole lot of interest and pursuit of trying to figure out ways that you could direct this, or you could make people. I mean, it leads directly to, or rather, this idea. You have the new Soviet man, you have Maoist thought reform, right? Which we call brainwashing because of Edward Hunter, but it's really thought reform in China and a very systematized process. And I get into some of the historical places where this has been, like the turncoats out of North Korea, these Americans who were going on radio and going on media and saying, that they did terrible, like we did terrible things in Korea that we didn't actually do. Anyway, and then I get into some of the cult stuff and, sort of take it through to the modern, what the hell is going on around here? Why are people so insane? So that's the basic idea for the book. And did I send you? I thought I sent you. Didn't I send you the PDF?
No.
Well, then I will have to send you the PDF. I read your book.
I don't want the PDF. I want a signed copy. I like having
I'll send you a signed copy. You're having me on your show. I have to say, it's very high praise. When I was going through with my PR team, like what shows I should do, I said, oh, my friend Michael Malice. They're like, his audience is smart and buys books. You should do that show. That was what I swear that was what they
It's
said.
true
So
though. I do as much as I can to alienate the illiterates and the unintelligent and the employable, unfortunately. So 2 out of 3 ain't bad.
I wouldn't say it if it wasn't true. That was actually what my PR like team gathered together. Like, oh, do Malice's show. They're smart and they read books. That
But
audience. So that's my praise.
I have to say I was expecting you to have a different pitch, and I agreed with pretty much every word you just said. The question I have for you though is when I was writing my book, Dear Reader, about North Korea, one of the things I realize is people often use the word crazy when they mean I can't explain this person's actions or thoughts. And very often, what someone is acting quote unquote crazy, other than like someone who's literally mentally ill, they're actually following a certain pattern of logic that validates or furthers their agenda in some capacity. So the question I have for you is, you know, I think it's, and I'm confident you agree, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. It's not just simply a matter of delusion. It's a complicated relationship between, let's suppose, the media and the political class and people on the left who are Democratic voters or operatives. It's much more nuanced than simple brainwashing, I'm sure you'd say.
Well, yeah, and I try to, when I get into, I mean, there's brainwashing, indoctrination, propaganda. I try to separate these things out. I mean, all of these things bleed over into each other. There's a lot of similarities. I tried to look at it through the lens of like a specific tactic, a thing, right? Like
Right.
what is menticide? What is the process of thought reform? How does it work? Isolation, why does that matter? Forced phobia, why does that
Yep.
matter? Identity construction, like creating this narrative for a person of who they are that they can place over the things that have been destroyed.
Yes.
So it's a little bit, in some ways it's almost like a brainwashing handbook because it goes through the specifics of how this goes. But I do think there's something fascinating with, for example, Robert Lifton. I mean, there are a few psychiatrists from the last 100 years that I relied on very heavily, like their work and their body of work for the research. And Robert Lifton went and interviewed a whole bunch of people who were, well, some Chinese, but also Westerners who were seized in Maoist China and were put through the absolute most sort of methodical and harsh thought reform, which is basically it's imprisonment slash indoctrination, almost like you're in a
Yep.
school situation where you have all these people that are telling you, but just even things like the role of confession in this and why
Yep.
confession is so important. Why
Yes.
is getting you, and so I look at this and I say, well, if confession is so important, when they already have you in a cell and they could kill you and no one's going to do anything about this, they can already beat you with truncheons as they are. But why is getting you to confess over and over again, by the way, such an important tool of mind control? And then I get into the left today, for example, and I'm not saying that they have us all locked in cells in Maoist China, but getting you to confess your privilege, for example, or getting you to confess your sins as there are tactical threads for the manipulation of people, and then of course the manipulation of masses that I think people need to have a better understanding of. And like I said, it really comes from, I remember you and I talking during COVID. I was doing your show. I'm like, people look at me when I say, why are you telling me to put a mask on to walk to my table? And then I sit there for 2 hours eating dinner without a mask on. Like, why don't you realize that's moronic? And they thought I was crazy. And this
Right.
was widespread. So there's something that you can do to people's minds that that can be done maybe to their minds that I think we need to have a better understanding of. And actually, I think you might find the last chapter, and it is on me. I should have sent you the books. I actually think you would like it. I'm now going to send you a signed copy of it. The last chapter I get into, it used to be, well, what do we know about coercive psychiatry and and sort of police state tactics, and how do those things come together? Increasingly, it's going to be, we can create this alternative reality through artificial intelligence, maybe even through brain implants. I mean, that's even further down the line, but that's not completely in the realm of science fiction now, when you'll be able to start to affect the actual structure of a human brain to bring about certain certain thought processes. And so I think more than ever, this is something that people really need to be aware of. I mean, in a sense, it was spurred by COVID, but obviously it goes far beyond that. I mean, like, how is it that all these libs, like women, mommies who live in Santa Monica, think that 15,000 black men are killed by cops every year? And like, this is like, you ever see this data? It's like, this stuff is crazy. But
Well,
even when you tell them it's crazy, they say, no, it's not. I believe this. And there's a whole machinery of, this is what you have to think. This is what you have to say.
or then they'll say the number doesn't matter, the point remains.
Yeah.
That's their Mott and Bailey.
Yeah.
So
That's
it's
right.
I'm
Directionally true, I think.
right. I'm frankly delighted to hear you say this, because one of the points I made in my book, The New Right, is that people on the right need to start focusing on tactics and not on the given arguments of the moment, which are basically tissues to people who are trying to increase government power. They don't, but it's what they say. The thing is, it's not really about the thing. There's so many people are interested in climate change and global warming because it gives them a really great backdoor to have control over literally every aspect of your environment, up to and including the toilet. And in fact, Margaret Thatcher, hardly a lefty, was the one who brought in climate change stuff into the British government. So when people are realizing, oh, it's not really about transgender people in bathrooms or this, it's like, what can I use? What truncheon do I have at the moment that will allow me to increase my power? How do they use these truncheons against innocent people or people who are not politically active one way or another? That is really, I think, the approach. So to hear you having this handbook to break that down, I think is just superb, because I would, from the title, and I owe you an apology, I underestimated you. I thought it was gonna be another one like, oh my God, the leftists are out of control again. I'm like, that book's been done. This is the kind of book I think that there needs to be more of, where it's like, it's they don't care about the climate. In 2 seconds, it would be like, oh, we need to have a global warming because the first people in Canada are too cold. You could hear them saying in 2 seconds. It doesn't matter.
Oh, well, look, first off, I appreciate that. And I would say that absolutely gets to a recurring theme that I have in the book. So, for example, in the chapter on menticide, which is a term coined by Joost Meerloo, who's a psychiatrist from the Second World War who was operating in occupied Holland. And he was trying to evade the Nazis, actually changed his name as part of that, and then found himself working with the Allies and debriefing Nazis. So got to and understand a bit of how they did what they did at the kind of mass psychological manipulation level. But he talks about menticide, the way you kill the mind, and there's the two things, like the twin pillars, are confusion and degradation.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to keep people confused all the time, meaning that you constantly change the words that are being used, the concepts that are being pushed, what the value system is, and then degradation, which is get people to say things that they probably think are untrue or knows that it's untrue, get them to be a part of things that go against their prior or their earlier value system. So you keep them confused and keep them degraded, and then you can start to get people to do absolutely anything. And then as far as the way that this progresses and how the big issue, which is straight out of Alinsky, by the way. I mean, Alinsky has some, I don't remember the exact quote, but it's essentially like, once you get people mobilized against pollution, the next step is, political pollution. And the next step is economic pollution, which is, Marxism. We need more, it's just, once you get people all chanting and marching and doing all this stuff, it's a lot easier to move them onto anything else. And so on the issue of like the transgender stuff, for example, which I think is a very clear case of a menticidal progression, there's a reason why they push this stuff. The hardest place for them, I think, to make their case is in the transgender surgery for minors stuff, or the hormones for minors. That's where it's like, that's where you really, but they want to do this. And there's a whole bunch of reasons why. One of them is part of the belief is that this is an innate, even though it's clearly a mutable characteristic, because it is something that has changed from when they were, assigned at birth or whatever. But the idea is that this is intrinsic to who they are. And so the earlier you can show that, so that the more valid it becomes. But even beyond that, and this I think is more to what we're just talking about, it gives the state the ability to come in and really supersede the relationship that parents have with their
Right.
children,
That's the key.
which is that's where it gets really scary. Where it's, oh no, you're going to trans your kid, or we're going to take your kids from you for their own good.
So
And
it's
that's a
interesting.
very hard thing for a government to pull off without people running for the pitchforks.
So two things. First of all, that phrase assigned at birth. I'm reading Andrew Doyle's book right now, The End of Woke, and he makes the point, even that's a lie, because the child's sex is often determined before birth. So if someone's having a boy or girl. So even the phrase assigned at birth is not factual, even if you're going to accept that whole crazy premise. I had this big epiphany. I just realized this on a live stream I did yesterday, and it's a little bit off topic, but I just want to say this to as many people as possible. I've made the point in trigonometry that this transing kids is often a form of Munchausen's by proxy. That if you give awfuls, affluent white female liberals, a chance to increase their status and be a trans mom, very quickly a little boy who played with a Barbie Corvette, now we're going to get him on hormones. Oh, he's really a girl, blah, 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 blah. And it's kind of horrific to see. And you see what's happening. MAID is now in 14 states, assisted ending of termination. It's in Canada. Now they're bringing it over to depressed people in Canada, trying to bring in disabled people. What happens when you have that option for kids? And that mom gets to be like, oh, he was such a lively young boy, then he got all depressed and blah, 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 blah. If you're telling me this is not something that can't be happening within 10, 15 years, the things that are happening now, 10 or 15 years ago, you thought would have been crazy. So that is something I'm worried about on the horizon that no one's talking about. And I think I'm glad you brought up Mao and some of these other organizations, because I think what conservatives, not you, but conservatives don't appreciate, and one of the reasons I wrote The White Pill, is the nature of evil. It's not just like we're going to raise taxes and give welfare to people who don't deserve it. It's not, oh, we're going to, let in immigrants so they can vote. It's a level of depravity that I think not all leftists, of course, certain conservatives can't wrap their head around, because like you said, they would never enter their head, I'm going to lock someone in a cage and beat them until they say Ronald Reagan's the greatest president ever. Like, what would be the, you know what I mean? For their heads, like, what would even be the point? It seems just such a waste of energy. But so it's hard to empathize with that kind of strategy.
Yeah, I think that understanding it from a tactical perspective is critical, because it also, I think, sometimes the ends that they describe as what they want can often be a smokescreen for what's really going on. I mean, a perfect example of this is I have a whole section on the immigration issue as well, where we've just in the most fundamental ways been lied to about the realities of mass illegal and in some ways legal immigration too in this country, but specifically illegal immigration for my entire adult life. I mean, I can speak to that. The idea that Democrats wanted this so badly because we needed these workers who were doing the jobs that Americans won't do. And like, we would basically have a non-functional economy without them, and that there's no drain on the public treasury or anything like that. So essentially you can bring in an unlimited amount of non-English speaking people from the third world of no educational background or particular skill set, and your country will get richer all the time. That just doesn't make sense at any level at all. And some people have started to point out rightly, if the whatever it is, 20% of Honduras that has come to America in the last 20 years is making America so rich, why weren't they making Honduras rich? I mean,
right.
Now I understand that's a little bit cheeky, but there's a reality to the cost that people see with these things. But it's also about, and this is the part of it that's like there's what they say, which is doing the jobs Americans won't do. It's also about the changing of American demographics, changing the congressional districts so that you have greater concentrations of illegals in these particularly blue areas that are then going to give them more congressional seats. And it's about turning this into a one-party country over a period of time, where you're going to have, certainly the children of illegals are going to be like, well, the Democrats are the party of my parents, and therefore, and so, ergo, and that's the real plan. That's the real strategy. It's not because we need people to pick our fruit. Like, we can actually figure that out. That actually can be done.
Folks, you all know that looks maxing is the rage nowadays. And as someone who's a professional model, what can I say? I certainly fall into that trend. In fact, I was ahead of that trend. And part of that is OneSkin. At the core of OneSkin's product is their patented OS1 peptide. It is the first ingredient proven to target senescent cells, which are a key driver of wrinkles, fine lines, and the loss of elasticity. And it's certified safe for sensitive skin. All of OneSkin's products are designed to layer seamlessly or replace multiple steps in your routine, so the skin health is easier and smarter at every age, even at my advanced age. It's gotten recognition from Fast Company, Bloomberg, The Today Show, and also has A-list fans. Dave Asprey is a great guy. Matthew McConaughey, he's also here in Austin. They're fans. And it was founded by an all-woman team of longevity scientists with PhDs in stem cell biology, skin regeneration, and tissue engineering. OneSkin is different because it's rooted in real science and expert research. Born from over a decade of longevity research, OneSkin's OS1 peptide is proven to target the visible signs of aging, helping you unlock your healthiest skin now and as you age. And for a limited time, try OneSkin with 15% off using code MALICE at oneskin.co/malice. That's 15% off oneskin.co with code MALICE. After you purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them. Please support the show. Tell them Michael Malice sent me. You're welcome. One of the great things about living in Austin as opposed to Brooklyn is I've got a lot of room for plants. And when it got cold here in winter, it was a little situation because I had to bring in the trees, and I do have a couple, into the house. And now it's warm again. I'm bringing them back outside. Maybe it's not warm where you are, but that doesn't matter because Fast Growing Trees can help you out. The thing with fastgrowingtrees.com is they make it easy to get your dream plants. You click, order, and grow, and you get healthy, thriving plants delivered to your door. But here's the thing. You can get ongoing support from trained plant experts who can help you plan your landscape, choose the right plants, and learn how to take care of them every step of the way. So if you're in a colder climate, like my former Brooklyn, you'll be able to get trees that can handle the Brooklyn cold that might not do so well here in the Austin heat. I got a plant from them. It was really fun because it was really big and for quite a reasonable price, and showed up my doorstep, ready pot. I couldn't be happier. Plants make your life better, and the experts at Fast Growing Trees have curated thousands of them for every climate and growing zone. And you get all the plants you need without the messy car or trip to the garden center. Plus, they've got a much better selection than any place you're going to find in your neighborhood. Right now, they got great deals on spring planting essentials, up to half off selected plants. Listeners to the show get 20% off their first purchase when using code WELCOME at checkout. That's an additional 20% off better plants and better growing at fastgrowingtrees.com. Use code WELCOME at checkout. Fastgrowingtrees.com, code WELCOME. Now's the perfect time to plant. Let's grow together. Use WELCOME to save today. Offer valid for a limited time. Terms and conditions may apply. Let's get back to the show. I'm trying to look it up because I heard that 20% statistic as well. And I don't remember what country it was, but I think
I'm not. It wasn't Honduras. It was something like, but it was one of those countries down there. I'm just, I was throwing that out.
I want to point this out because this has become a talking point in the right. So as soon as I heard it, I'm like, wait a minute, this is crazy. There's some Central American country, 20% of their population came here, which is like, holy crap. But then I looked it up, and I think the country's population was like 300,000. So it was like 60,000 people came here. It's like, oh, okay. Like 60,000 in terms of 10 million is hardly, although it's obviously going to be enormously impactful in the home country in terms of the problem here. It is not all.
That's probably small. But in this case, the point is merely, they're not sending us their best necessarily, or rather the people that are coming in illegally.
Right.
We're so willing in this country because of particularly the media. And one of the things I took from your show actually years ago, when you said, don't call them the mainstream media. I agreed with you, and I've made that I still don't feel like there's the corporate media.
Corporate press.
Corporate press is probably the closest.
Corporate press,
yeah. The corporate press is probably the closest, but they ran this whole campaign too of really denigrating Americans as part of the uplift of illegals, meaning the talking points were things like illegals are harder working and more law abiding and all this stuff. And it's like, really? But the answer, of course, is that's not really true. But the point is
hold on. The answer is, who cares? Like, I don't care.
Yeah.
Okay. Like, that's why I said on Rogan last week, I'm like, if it's 10 million homemakers, is that going to have no impact on America? What are you talking about? Like, it's a complete red herring, in my opinion.
Well, we've also we've seen the experiment run now, and you've seen it in a number of European countries too, where I mean, it turns out if you take Belgium, and again, I'm making up numbers, but just, if you take Belgium and you add 5 million people from the Middle East and sub-Saharan Africa into Belgium, like, it's a different country.
But but but, but
Which is the most obvious thing in the world, but we've been led to believe that's not true.
it's even simpler. You take a million New Yorkers and put them in Texas, or put them in Florida, or a million people in California and put them in Louisiana. That's not going to have an impact. What are you even talking? You know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
nonsensical.
it makes no sense. It is, you could say, a delusion, almost like
I
a
wouldn't call it.
manufactured delusion.
I mean, in all fairness, I mean, to be a little pedantic in a valid sense, it's just a lie.
Yeah.
It's just a complete. That's the other thing that I think is tricky, and I'd like to pick your brain. I think a lot of times conservatives think, and I like that you use the word delusion, that leftists are lying with a straight face. And if you look at things from an evolutionary psychology point of view, and if my status is based on passing within a certain socioeconomic structure, it's evolutionary advantageous for me to lie about it, but also to lie so well that I believe my own BS. So I think a lot of times conservatives get frustrated because you sit them down, you're like Ross Perot with the charts and graphs, people are going to come around to you. There's no incentive for me, if I'm in New York as a high status leftist, to start going against my pack, even if what I'm saying is true. How will that help me? I don't have the power to impact policy, but I do have the power to lose my job and have everyone in my office look at me like a MAGA freak. So the incentives really align with me smiling and nodding.
Yeah, that's totally true. I'm fond of pointing out to fellow conservatives or right wingers or whatever, every time that someone on CNN or any of the, the View, any of these places take some position that is manifestly dumb and proven wrong the next day, right? Like, I bet this, the shooter yelled Allahu Akbar, but I bet he was a MAGA hat wearing, it doesn't matter, like, however dumb it may be and how obviously false. And then the next day it's proven wrong, or something else comes out and it turns out that, like, their crazy thing is not accurate. Yeah, you know what I mean?
No, I'm just laughing because I can imagine them saying he was yelling Allahu Akbar, but didn't you know that means God is great? Are you saying God isn't great?
Yeah, whatever it is. People say, oh, they're going to be so embarrassed. And I have to tell everyone, like, they're not embarrassed. That's their job. Their job is to tell the idiots who listen to them exactly what they want to hear. And as long as they keep doing that, and this goes directly to your point, they keep their job. Their job is not to tell the truth. And whether it's the corporate press or you look at these different entities out there, their job, there is no expectation actually even of being accurate or telling truths that are, in fact, a lot of the time, the left really takes a position that there are things that are true that should be rejected just because they're so hurtful or harmful.
Right.
So the notion of truth is something that itself is as it, like, definitionally is under assault by the left. But yeah, of course, the people that think that there's going to be some ethics all of a sudden that comes into play, like when they defame somebody, whether it's like remember the what was the school? I forget the school. Was it Covington Catholic, where the kid
Covington,
when they all attack him, whatever, they do this because that's what their audience expects. They don't feel badly about this.
Right.
They're attack dogs. Attack dogs attack because that's what they've been trained to do. They don't think beyond that. And so this is the way that when people understand that that's how the media functions, they're never surprised, and they can anticipate what the reality of it is, and what it is going to be like going forward. So, yeah, that's how I see it.
I'm just giddy to hear how you're talking. I'm not gonna lie, because like this is just like I agree with everything you're saying. I'll give another example, which is just this past week, Stephen Colbert, who is one of the. I mean, he is so salty he could play Ursula the Sea Witch, because it's just amazing how salty he is. The poor, and he's been the biggest victim since Christ. I mean, just ask him. Like, he can't even handle how much he's been martyred. There's a next week or a couple of weeks, there's going to be a primary for Texas Senate, and there's two or three candidates on the Republican side. The sitting John Cornyn, who's the sitting senator. You have Ken Paxton, Attorney General. There's a third guy. I'm blanking his name. I don't want to. Do you remember who I'm talking about? He's African
Everyone blanks his name, including me. But yes, and then you got Tallarico and Jasmine Crockett on the Democrat side.
So. Colbert decides to have Tallarico, although Jasmine Crockett is, of those five people, I'm sure you would agree, Jasmine Crockett would clearly be the most entertaining to have on a talk show and
The
would be
best
the one.
ratings by far, clearly. Yeah,
Right,
absolutely.
and clearly just the best talker. Like, she knows how to run her mouth. Like, she puts on a show. It's very clear she knows how to put on a show. Nope. Colbert decides to put his finger on the scale, have Tallarico on and not her, and not have any of the Republicans. The FCC and more importantly, his parent company's like, look, this is going against kind of fair play rules. Like, we're not trying to be picking sides between parties and within a party. And he loses his mind. And it's like, it's not your house. You
Yeah.
work for CBS. Nope. Like, I am here. Like, it's more important. I'm not here to put on a good show. I'm not here to promote CBS or get ratings. I'm here to promote a certain candidate at the expense of others, which is fine if that's your approach, but don't pretend that's not your approach.
Well, this was always my problem with CNN, by the way, and a lot of these places was that, and why I don't have a similar problem with Fox News, which is that there is an understanding that they are right of center at Fox, right?
Yes.
They have conservative hosts, like Sean Hannity does his show at night, and he's like, I'm a conservative, I'm a Republican. Here's what I think. Take it or leave it, but I'm a conservative, I'm a Republican. There's an inherent honesty in that. Jake Tapper, Anderson Cooper, go down the list, all these guys, they'll say, no, I'm a journalist. I don't have it, I mean, which is just, and the fact they pulled this scam off as long as they did is preposterous.
Well, hold on a second. It's not, I don't think it's preposterous. Leftists don't think they're leftists. They think they're normal.
Well, I mean, they think they're normal Democrats. I think they know that they vote. Anderson Cooper has voted Democrat every year of his life.
Hold on.
He could vote.
They think, and Maher's been explicit about this, normal people are Democrats. The other side are freaks. Now, we as normal leftists can disagree about Medicare for all, immigration, so on and so forth, but our range of opinion is somewhere in this space, and anyone outside of it is a freak. Maybe they're interesting to talk to in a certain sense, but we're not really seriously going to impose it or implement any of those positions. That's the mindset.
Well, I agree with you. That's the mindset, but I think that also they believe that within that mindset, that framework that you've described is being a Democrat. So the idea that they're not, so I mean, so what I'm saying is that at least like Sean Hannity goes on and says, I'm a Republican, and these other guys go on their shows, whatever it is at CNN, a little less at MS Now. I love that they've had to change the name because the brand just got so toxic, but MS Now, they won't say that they have any political affiliation whatsoever. Now you're right about where they think their ideology is. Sure, yeah, of course. They think they're just like normal and smart and everyone else is nuts. But they don't even have the self-awareness to be like, well, I vote Democrat in every election. Right? So like how can you be honest with the public when you can't be honest with yourself about where your politics lie?
This was Mar. Wait, hold on. I think we might be disagreeing here because this is Mar's point. Mar is saying not that he always votes Democrat because he's a partisan. He's saying he always votes Democrat because they're directionally the only people who are remotely close to the sanity.
I hear you. I mean, I think that's kind of circular logic. It's kind of the same thing, right? If the only sane people are Democrats,
no, it's
you
not,
have
because
to recognize that you are a Democrat.
No, they would say if there was some third party which implemented their views even more, they'd jump ship in 2 seconds, and I think that's truthful.
But that's true of any. I mean, the Republican Party could change all of its platform next year. Like like that's a theoretical that doesn't really affect the current reality, which is that, of course, they're Democrats.
But they're not working in reality. They're working in theoreticals, is my point. So this is what they tell. To your point about delusion, I'm trying to make your case, MFer. The delusion is I'm not a partisan Democrat. I'm a normal person. And being a normal person means I have to vote Democrat because that's the only option on the table. That's how, but Sean Hannity is just a Republican partisan hack who is promoting the Republican Party, even though he knows full well how screwed up and awful it is. That's their thinking.
That's what the left, sure.
Yes.
I see the nuance that you're saying about how they're not really Democrats. They're just normal. And it just so happens that all normal people are Democrats, but that's really slicing the onion pretty thin.
That's how delusion works.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Delusion is actually I got into this too, and I learned a lot about. I'm taking this in a slightly different direction, but some of the research that I did. By the way, they had to cut. I wrote like initially just on all the Pavlov stuff because I thought Pavlov's relationship, and I thought you would think this is interesting, his relationship with the Soviets was fascinating because the Soviets, on the one, first of all, he almost like starved to death at one point because they screwed up so badly when they initially took over, and there was no funding for anything all of a sudden, and there's famine, and it's a complete nightmare. And then they realized, well, we have this Nobel laureate scientist. We should probably like not let him starve to death on the street. That's a rough look, for
Like a dog.
like a yeah, like a globally famous scientist to just like
Right.
wither away and die on like the outside of Red Square. So then they started funding his labs and stuff. But he would talk smack publicly about the Soviet and the communist system in a way that, I mean, certainly around his era, I'm talking like 20s, 30s. I don't know anybody else that was getting away with that kind of stuff, and really had very harsh work. They made me pull this out of the books; it was just getting too long. But he was this rare guy who was, on the one hand, very critical of the Soviet system, but also benefited from it considerably insofar as they funded his labs and his research and Koltushi and set up these places for him to do his stuff. And so I think he had to make that calculation of what I'm doing is important enough for humanity that even if I have to deal with some really unsavory people to get my to continue in this research, he was trying to figure out ways to improve the human condition, right? So there's a lot of ways that you can justify these things to yourself, but he recognized that the Soviet project was just lies and butchery and madness. So I thought that part of it was really interesting. But on the psychology side, I started doing deep dives into this because I used to have this smug idea that I would share with people, which was true, which is that every hot, crazy girl in college was a psychology major, which I'm just going to tell you for the gentlemen out there, it's true.
Okay.
But all the hot, crazy chicks were psych majors, and there's probably a reason for that. But I think that people should learn more about this stuff because so many of the problems that you have to deal with, everything, interpersonally, family, office, goes to different levels of these personality disorders and problems.
Oh, yes.
And like narcissistic personality disorder, which is very common among really, makes sense when you understand the disorder, some very powerful and influential people too. But narcissistic personality disorder is an incredibly, it's like a brilliant mechanism of constant self-aggrandizement at the expense of everybody around you. And this is in the DSM-5, like this is a real thing that people have. And I think it goes under kind of the cluster B or borderline.
Yes, dark triad.
Yeah. And NPD is like, if you're dealing with somebody with NPD, good luck.
I'll give you an example of this. When Hillary Clinton was running for Senate in New York in 2000, she was running for the seat of retiring Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan. And she goes to visit him, and she's first lady at the time. She has no political position at all in a literal sense. And she's talking to Moynihan's wife, and she's like, oh, I've got this bill in the Senate, and it's going to do such, and such. And the wife either looks at her, or I think she looks at her, she goes, Hillary, that's Pat's bill. Like, it was Daniel Patrick Moynihan's bill. So it's just like, first of all, the insanity of a first lady having legislation makes no sense. But also, she didn't even have the wherewithal. The thing with narcissists is they're kind of oblivious to who they're talking to often, and that's where they trip up. They're constantly on the megaphone. I was talking to friends of mine in the Libertarian Party, and Trump spoke at the Libertarian Convention in 2024, and some things they cheered heavily on, some things they booed him on a lot. And I asked, what was it like? You know what he said? They loved me, because he'll hear the cheering and he won't register the booing. And frankly, if you're going to have that kind of job as president, you have to have a screw loose.
Yeah, it's like a superpower for presidents and
the attacks you're going to get on you and your family, even if you're an angel, are going to be horrific. So, and if you come in normal, you're not going to leave normal.
And also the victim bully paradigm, I think, is really interesting with some of these people too. And I even see this. You can even sort of see this in the context of the way the state, if it, government is trying to brainwash, indoctrinate people, thought reform them, whatever you want to say, which is, one moment it's like, why have you done this bad thing to me? Why have you victimized me, or, why have you betrayed me? Then a moment later, it's like, I will crush you and I will destroy you. And it kind of goes back and forth all the time. Why don't you love me? I'm going to destroy you. And it really keeps people confused and degraded. I mean, you go through these processes, and really, mass hysteria is just mind. It's just mind control of the individual at scale, right? It's when they are able to do these things in a way that is broad enough that you just have the numbers. I also thought it was really interesting. There was a whole book, you would really like it. I have it over here, Iconography of Power, and this also got cut from the
Oh,
from the final manuscript. There's all this stuff that got cut that I'm like, ugh, I kind of wish it had still been in there. But it's really just about the cult of personality that was built around Stalin, and how, and people, I know you wrote a book on North Korea, and you're expert in the way that they did. It's all, Stalin was kind of the OG of this,
yes.
even before Mao, obviously, and there was a lot that was borrowed from Stalin for this. But just the usage of the posters everywhere, like you have this constant visual reminder and representation of the all powerful that is around you, and even smaller things too, like how they went from the initial, you have these intellectuals, whatever, you have like Lenin and these people who their symbol is like the peasant, and I'm talking about their symbol on the posters,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Is the peasant with the scythe or whatever,
Sickle.
getting the wheat sickle. Thank you,
Yeah.
getting the wheat, and then they transform this when they're like, well, we kind of want everyone to be in the cities, and then it's like the guy rolling up his sleeve at the factory and everything else. It's all just visualizations of this kind of unreality. I mean, first of all, they starved millions of the peasants, and they weren't particularly good at doing much of the factory stuff that they tried to do. So anyway, I just think that the usage of posters just everywhere, millions and millions of these posters printed, that was a sort of a new, mass media capable phenomenon where you could actually do this. It wasn't really possible before, and put them in as many places before. So I thought that was really, I want to grab it for you. I thought that was really cool. And I got through all these very interesting sort of backstories and themes about all this, because I think that the ways that people are, psychologically influenced, I mean, it's obviously the basis of politics in so many ways, but it's also the worst stuff that happens. And this is why I think it's so important. The worst stuff that happens is when large groups of people start believing stuff that is untrue.
Time for real talk. Life insurance. You might have it, you might not. Do you even know how much you're paying for it, how much you're being covered? Because you're probably paying too much for too little. And did you know if you receive life insurance through your job and you're laid off, you could suddenly be covered for nothing? Scary to think about, but simple to get right, thanks to Select Quote. You guys just saw me on Rogan probably talking about Scott Adams passing. Awful situation. You never know when the worst can happen, but it's always a good idea to start planning for it to make it as painless as possible. Life insurance is a great way to protect your future and the future of your family. For over 40 years, SelectQuote has been one of the most trusted brokers in insurance, helping more than 2 million Americans secure over $700 billion in coverage. Their mission is simple: finding you the right life insurance policy for your unique needs. They shop, you save. And unlike some other one-size-fits-all life insurance companies, SelectQuote's licensed agents work for you. It could be as little as 15 minutes. They compare policies from top-rated carriers to find you the best fit for your health and your budget, and they work for you for free. No medical exam, no problem. They partner with providers offering same-day coverage for up to $2 million without needing to visit your doctor. Get the right life insurance for you for less. Save more than 50% off at selectquote.com/you're welcome. That's why you are. Save more than 50% off on term life insurance at selectquote.com/you're welcome today. To get started, that's selectquote.com/you're welcome. Life insurance is never cheaper than it is today. SelectQuote. They shop, you save. Let's get back to the show. I'm really glad to hear you say this again, because I think a lot of times conservatives just think these things happen spontaneously, or, if there's some kind of new slang, it just develops. And it's like, conservatism, the best argument for it is it looks at the lessons of history, it applies them today, that human beings are really not that different from 5,000 years ago in many senses. And to hear you actually trace these things, like, it is, I think, very healthy and smart to kind of reverse engineer how do we get here. I want to talk to you a little about global warming, because Scott Adams had this great book called Reframe Your Brain. There's a regular framework, here's an example is I should do the best job I can. The reframe is my job is to train myself to get a better job. And right away, when you think in those different terms, you're like, oh crap, okay, it's a very different approach. So David Friedman, who has a chapter in the Anarchist Handbook, who's I think an amazing thinker, he gave a talk on global warming, and within the first 30 seconds, just blew my mind. And it goes, there's two things about global warming, he says, that I think are smuggled in that make no sense. One is that if it's man-made, therefore that matters. And he's like, if a comet's coming to the Earth to kill everybody, we're not going to be like, well, it's natural, so I'm fine with it. Like, who cares? Like, if it's man-made or not? But as I'm sure you understand, because it's man-made, therefore it smuggles in this idea that it's sinful and
Mass
bad.
confession. Yes,
Right.
it is. That's where it gets into the religious aspect. Yeah.
And his other point is, David said this, I'm not at all why is it a given that warming is bad? Because there's far more life at the equator than there is at the poles. He's like, it's easier for life to live when it's warmer than when it's colder, so on and so forth. And the third point was, it's also presented as a given that if there is a change, that change is catastrophic. And it's like, you know what? Not every bone you break is your skull. If I break my pinky toe, it's going to suck. It's not catastrophic. There's a difference between a cold and lung cancer, but no, if there's a problem, it has to be not just an emergency, but an emergency that's on the verge of ending all civilization and life as we know it. And people just take all these things as a given within this issue.
Well, this gets into I talk about forced phobia. Phobia obviously exists in the psychological context as an irrational fear of something, which is why I've always, for example, disliked and rejected the term Islamophobia, because I'm not phobic of it. There are just things about it that I'm very critical of. I don't have an irrational fear of it. I wouldn't even say I have a fear of it. I have criticisms and concerns. It's not the same thing, right? But they say phobia, and the same, by the way, transphobia, the same thing. You want to talk about, does a 200-pound guy who's built like Macho Man Randy Savage have a physical advantage over like 18-year-old girls in a lacrosse field? You're not transphobic, okay? You don't have an irrational fear of him. You're just a person that recognizes reality. But force phobia in the psychiatric or psychological context is when you're just intentionally trying to create irrational fear for the purpose of control. And this is another very important part of the playbook, if you will, for manufacturing delusion. And the climate change aspect of this is fascinating because it's so successful with some people that, I mean, it's hard to even imagine how this happens, but it does. There are people who have made the decision, and I don't think I'm not saying it's a huge number, but it's not an insignificant number. It's enough that there's real data set of it.
Sure.
Who will not have children.
Right.
Who are foregoing having children because of the impact on climate.
Hold on a second, though. The thing is, a lot of times these things are just an excuse to get the person to do what they wanted anyway.
Wait, what? I'm sorry, what do you mean?
Meaning, like, I don't want to have kids. This gives me a moral justification to avoid doing it.
I mean, that may be true, but I don't think you have to search for a moral justification. If you don't have kids, just don't have kids.
No, I think people like
the New York Times. You think they want to just like get a pat on the back on top of not having kids, kind of a thing?
You don't think people look for those pats on the back, especially leftists in urban centers?
Yeah, I mean, sure, in general, but I mean, let's just be real here for a second. The decision to not have children and to ascribe it to climate fear, like even if you're right, and I'm not saying you're not right, that the motivation is really to tie I'm not having kids to the earth is warming or climate change, which is even funnier, right? Think about this, the vaguest. I love all this talk too, because the guy you mentioned, I agree with everything that he said. And it's all obviously true. What does the climate change even mean? It has no meaning. Of course, the climate's always changing. And so then there was this thing for a while of, do you not believe in climate change? Well, what does that mean?
Right.
Does it mean that, do I think the world is probably getting a little warmer or maybe getting a little cooler over the next 50 years? Sure. Do I think it matters in any meaningful way to any of us? Absolutely not. And
Right.
I've always thought that. And I'm also, you can tell because the people, when push comes to shove, people don't live their lives like they really believe that either, which I think is also really.
Wait, can I bring this up? Because
Oh,
I got
yeah.
heat on this on Rogan. Because my point was, I'm not a scientist, you aren't a scientist, Joe. When I look at what someone believes, I look at their revealed preferences, right? Someone can tell me all the time, I love my wife, I'd never cheat on her, never cheat on her. Yeah, is he getting his you know what wet with another woman, or is he staying faithful to her? That's what matters, not what you're flapping your gums about. So the question is, all these people who think, okay, New York City is going to be underwater in 10 years, are they buying that shorefront real estate, or are they selling it because it's going to be worthless in 10 years? And if you look at those real estate prices, they go up. So people who flap their gums about this are putting their money in the opposite of what they're saying. And that is a much more reliable indicator of their views than whatever they happen to say for political or posturing purposes.
I agree with that. I would say on your point about people say that they don't want to have kids because of the impact on climate. One, there are a lot of policies that we all have to live with because of climate impact that are insane. And so people at some level clearly do believe this stuff, right? I mean, this isn't a totally, it's not entirely cynical for those who are taking these actions, right? They actually think this, even something as stupid as, I mean, I'm here in Florida, which is amazing to me. You're in Texas, so I guess that's good enough. I thought after New York you'd move to Florida, but Texas is good enough. Here we have plastic bags. And when you go to the grocery store, which I grew up with in New York, this is just like normal. You plastic bags, paper or plastic, but if you want a plastic, they don't have them in New York now. You know this, right? Like
Right.
you have like all these plastic bag restrictions. And now they've found out that paper bags are actually more problematic in some ways if you do the full analysis of this than plastic bags, because plastic bags are much lighter, therefore they require far less to transport. They don't require, you're
Right.
not chopping down trees for them, but also most importantly, they're highly reusable. And people will use a plastic bag. Like I actually have like a little plastic, how you feel like the packet drawer for your Chinese sauce and stuff. I have like a plastic bag drawer in my kitchen where I
Buck,
just keep plastic
Buck,
bags because I use them. What?
Buck, you're talking to an immigrant. Every Russian person watching this right now, under their sink, has a plastic bag section and has had it in perpetuity. So I like how it's reached the Americans, but you never know I have it right now. There's probably 50 of them there under my sink. You open the door, go to any Russian household, go right to the sink, hook it up. It's going to be there. And also that butter cookies tin from Scandinavia, that's used for sewing supplies. Every single Russian immigrant ever.
So there you go. So you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yes.
And yet, so they did something that was going to be so minor anyway, and now they find that it's actually bad, and they won't change it because the point wasn't whether it was good or bad. The point is it made them feel good when they did it. So I agree with it made them feel good about themselves, I should say, when they did it. On the climate extinction thing, though, with having kids, I feel like, especially for example, for women saying, I don't want to have kids, I want to pursue a career, people will pat you on the back for that. There's a lot of ways to get a pat on the back for not having kids, which is I think by the way, I agree with Elon's take on we need more people. I actually think that's very true. Certainly in like developed countries,
Right. We need a certain kind of people. Right.
yeah, we need more. We need more productive civilization upholding kind of
Yes.
people.
They're a net
And that,
benefit.
yeah, that's very important. But on the climate extinction thing, I mean, just the fact that it's even I mean, it's so stupid and so absurd that anybody would even get credit for saying it. Like, even if your premise is totally true, which I think it's probably true some of the times. I think sometimes people honestly believe this stuff enough. Like, because I could read it. I mean, I don't want to pull out the book right now. There's like New York Times articles of people, Michael, who say they can't sleep at night. They have anxiety because of climate change.
But Buck, me saying that look, I'm in the New York Times saying this now. Do you see how high status that makes me?
Maybe this is where it starts to separate, where it's like I can't think of what it's like to be such
But
a
also,
wacky.
look, if I'm in a constant state of neurosis, everyone else has to give me attention, and I'm the victim. That's another high status marker.
But I mean, there are people who like went and firebombed Teslas because they like are angry about. Well, I guess that's because they're angry about Elon. That's not really. I'm trying to think of environmentalists. Okay, the climate extinction people who do the hands on the paintings or whatever. Which, by the way, there is something so debasing and grotesque about what they do. And I mean, maybe at some level, I recognize that this is like there's an iconography here as well, and
Of
that a painting
course,
is a painting,
it's
whatever.
defiling a
But
temple.
yeah, but that they
I'm
would
gonna
do that.
I'm gonna make one more point, though. This is important. The plastic bags. They're not entirely wrong about the plastic bags because the plastic bags go in the ocean and sea turtles, they look like jellyfish, and sea turtles eat jellyfish, and then their digestive system gets blocked because the plastic can't be digested and they die. So that I think was the reason for the plastic bag stuff. So it's not entirely nonsense.
Well, the problem with the plastic recycling programs that we have, for example, is, as I'm sure you know, it overwhelmingly, because it's cheaper for the companies that collect it,
Right.
just gets resold to Asia, and then it
Right.
goes right into the rivers and the oceans, and
Right.
nobody gives a you know what. And that,
Right.
so again, there's the intent of the program, and then there's the effect of it, which is kind of unfortunately
Well, I
that's
think
like the
the
fun.
intent is to have everyone be obedient. That's the intent.
Well, yeah. Well, that was what we that was again bringing back to the COVID thing, which I still feel like now talking about COVID, you're almost like the annoying person talking about the national debt is too high. It's like you're right and everyone knows you're right, but everyone's like, shut up. Like, nobody wants to hear it anymore. And I sit here, I'm like, this is the entire world went completely insane for a solid 2.5 years, and we've never really come to grips with how this happened or why this happened, and we just decide to move on. If that can happen with something like that, I mean, I've said this to people before. Imagine if we had a fatality rate. I mean, the real fatality rate of COVID was probably like, I don't know, 0.01 or something. I mean, 0.001. It was, it was similar to a bad flu season. And if we had something that was like a 5 or a 10% fatality, people who got, I mean, the civilization would crumble and people would completely freak out. So
And I would blame them. If
but
if
there,
if 1 out
well,
of
yeah,
10 people I knew died, I that would be a dramatic impact on my life for sure.
yeah. But we're not prepared at all for the reality of what a pandemic, in the sense of something that everybody really needs to be deeply worried about. And it's because we haven't, it's what did Hitchens say? It's because our prefrontal lobes are too small and our adrenal glands are too big, and we're afraid of dying. We're afraid of the dark. I'm just quoting Hitchens. You can
Yeah,
argue with
yeah.
him if you,
And
this is what it comes down to.
and here's something else. All the techniques, I've just said this on Rogan, all the techniques those social media and media companies learned during COVID on how to keep you in a state of constant agitation and always on your screen looking for the news, just because COVID's gone doesn't mean those techniques haven't vanished. And I think they're weaponizing them very effectively to keep people in a state of COVID-like agitation 24/7. You step away from social media, you see real life. You're like, I am putting myself in a Plato's cave of my own design. And here's something else that was kind of scary. In terms of reality, I have no way of knowing what normal people think because my algorithm reflects my views. And then polling is not reliable. So literally, how popular deportations are, I can only kind of use common sense, which is a very poor indicator of how 350 million people are thinking.
Yeah, I think that I mean, you unpacked a few things there. One is the social media apparatus of either completely inane, worthless stuff and or stuff that is rage clickbait is, I mean, look, it drives so much of the news cycle right now. I mean, I've had to point this out to people, and I've thinking Nancy Guthrie's kidnapping is not a national news story, or rather, it shouldn't be. It's a story. It's sad. Someone's, mom. I get all that, but people get shot, killed. I mean, bad things happen in this country every day. But there are certain things that, because in this case, because of a media star involved in it, it quickly becomes very personalized for people when they actually have no connection to it whatsoever. I think there are a lot of things that the news cycle is dominated by now, that if people sat back and they thought about it for a second, they'd be like, not only is there too much emphasis on this, it's actually not important.
And you know what else? If you're downplaying a buck, that means you're complicit.
Yeah, of course.
So you're in on it or you don't care, and you're glad she got kidnapped. Like this is it's running this us them filter. Unless you care about this, we saw this with racism. Unless you care about this problem to the same extent that someone on 10 does, you are complicit and you are a white nationalist and a racist. It's completely coherent, but also completely insane.
One of the tactics of the person with narcissistic personality disorder is the totally good versus totally bad. You're either 100% with me in everything I do with love, or else screw you, I hate you, you're terrible. And putting people into that box all the time, because that way you avoid having any actual exchange of ideas, conversation, or having to have any empathy for what they need or what they want.
Do you know by definition how you know if someone is a narcissist? On sight.
What do you mean?
They have a really big head. The new book is called Manufacturing Delusion by Buck Sexton. I'm actually really excited to read it. So please,
I'm gonna, as soon as we're done here, I'm gonna have you give me your home address. I'm gonna send you a signed copy with some pithy commentary.
I'll give you my PO box because you were a spook. Buck, we're running out of time. What has been your favorite part of this interview?
The part where you admitted that my book was better than you probably thought it was going to be. So there you go.
Freely.
That was my favorite part. Yeah, no, it's real. There's like real research, real thought, real stuff in there. It's not just like blah, 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 like right wing, like America. So yeah, no, it's a real book.
Are welcome.
Hey, it's James Altucher. I've been an entrepreneur, investor, best-selling writer, stand-up comic, and whatever it is I'm interested in, I get obsessed. Yes, it's led to success, but it's also led to such heartbreaking failure. I have failed more times than I can count. I wish in my life I had people to talk to. That's why I started the James Altucher Show and bring on some of the most brilliant minds in every area of life. People like Richard Branson, Sarah Blakely, Mark Cuban, Danica Patrick, Gary Kasparov, and I wanted to find out exactly how they've navigated the highs, the lows, and everything in between. No fluff, just raw stories and real advice. I've talked to 1,500 of the most amazing people on the planet. So if you want to learn from the best and skip the same old canned interviews, we're all about helping you find your next big idea, level up your thinking, and ultimately to choose yourself. So let's do this together. Subscribe now to The James Altucher Show.
At Pluto TV, we're celebrating Black History Month with our free curated collection of Black entertainment.
No ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Catch award-winning films like Dreamgirls, Monsters Ball, and Selma.
We must make a massive demonstration.
Iconic hits like School Days and Set It Off. Plus full seasons of shows like Tyler Perry's Sisters and Power.
I got you.
It's star-studded brilliant Black entertainment, and it's all free.
It's getting good.
This month and always on Pluto TV. Stream now, pay never.